Without further ado.
Thank you, Nick. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Hope your holidays were as nice as mine. The only part that wasn't quite so nice is the football game that I went to in Dallas with Tom Berge. We drove just 1,500 miles to get there, and our team didn't show up. But anyways, we had a great time. Hope you did too. They've asked me to talk about the tax reform bill, and I want to throw out the disclaimer that I am not a tax attorney and don't give tax advice, and I'm not an accountant, and I'm not an attorney, and I don't give legal advice. So I know that this bill was somewhat controversial, and I'll approach it through the eyes of NAR. And I think I've got about 20 minutes, but I could go on probably a little bit longer than that. So if you have questions about what I've just talked about, go ahead and ask the questions. We'll flip it around this time instead of saving the questions for the end. Okay, so Tax Cut and Jobs Act. I always love the titles that they give them. They sound so wonderful. I'm going to read you the introduction from NAR's report. It says, while NAR remains concerned about the overall structure of the final bill, that the final bill diminishes the tax benefits of home ownership and will cause adverse impacts in some markets, the advocacy of NAR members as well as consumers helped NAR to gain some important improvements through the legislative process. So what's interesting about this is we've got two bodies that you are, obviously as a member of the West San Gabriel Valley Association of Realtors, you're a member of California Association of Realtors, and you're a member of the National Association of Realtors. So this bill affects those in California different than it affects the rest of the country. So while the NAR kind of sold off on it, they weren't pleased, but they were happy with what they gained. They were generally pleased and then stopped fighting the bill. But California Association never dropped their opposition, and I'll explain why later. So the first thing that we accomplished in our lobbying was to keep the capital gains provision in there, IRC 121, I believe it is, that says that when you sell your house, you could take $250,000 worth of gain and not pay taxes on it. And if you're a married couple, then you could take $500,000. So both the House and the Senate came up with ways to try to tighten that out. One of them you had to live there 5 out of 7 years, I believe it was. Anyways, it would have been very difficult for those who serve in the military, who move around on a 2-year basis. And there were a number of things that we were opposed to there. So we got that part unchanged. So that stays in the.
That's a win.
That's a big win for real estate. So the next thing is the mortgage interest deduction, and the Senate wanted the mortgage interest deduction to be $1 million. The House wanted it to be $500,000. They ended up with a compromise of $750,000. It's not really a win. It's good that it's still there. It's good that we kept it. I think it adversely affects California because our home values are much higher than those across the country. We're about 2.5 times the average median price from the nation. So it's good. I was thinking about my own transactions recently, and I can't remember having a mortgage over $750,000. So maybe it won't affect us. We have a lot of cash in our market. So we'll see how that plays out. The next one, and I think this is really where CAR and NAR disagree on their support, and that's, they call it SALT, S-A-L-T, and it stands for state and local taxes. So for your state income taxes, you used to be able to deduct that from your federal income taxes, and your property tax you used to be able to deduct from your federal taxes. And now you'll only be able to deduct up to $10,000 for those two. So I get why they did it, because the red states were tired of subsidizing the blue states. But the reality is that in California, it's going to affect us. So that's something to watch. The standard deduction is gone from 12 to 24, so, or up 6 to 12, pardon me, 6 to 12, and for couples up 12 to 24. So that part's good. So what they've done is they've kind of simplified it, and they've made it so more people are going to just take the standard deductions, and fewer people are going to itemize their deductions. Okay, so that, if you take off your real estate hat, that sounds really good. But when you we'll come back around to it in a minute, and you'll see why that may not be as good for us in the long run. So it definitely simplifies the tax process, and it should be good for a lot of people. They repealed the personal exemptions. Under the prior law, tax filers could deduct $4,150 for each filer and his or her spouse, and they did away with that. So that does kind of eat into the standard deduction a little bit. There's a lot of deductions. We'll still be able to deduct our medical expenses. The child credit went from $1,000 to $2,000, so go have more children. That'll help you with your taxes. And they took out the moving expenses, so you can no longer deduct your moving expenses unless you're in the military. So at least they left that in. Okay, now, as for the commercial market, the big win there was that they kept in the 1031 exchanges, which we really fought for, because that would have crushed the real estate, the commercial real estate market. Interesting tidbit on that is that they used to allow it on non-real property that qualified. So it could have been like airplanes or boats or things like that. And now they're going to disallow that. So for those of you with planes, where's Bob Bodkin? Okay, they retained the way that you recover your depreciation. Very minimal changes there. And then there was a whole bunch of other things affecting historic credits, a lot of other little provisions, and I'm not going to get into those. But if you're curious, come up and ask me, and I'll either share the paperwork with you or point you in the right direction. So then that's kind of it in a nutshell how it affects real estate, the properties. But now let's look at how it affects us as realtors or as wage earners. Okay. The tax brackets for almost everybody have come down. So if you made, say, $100 to $150,000 last year, instead of 28% tax, you're going to be paying 24% tax. So that's pretty good. I look at it as these will help people buy real estate. I know I buy more real estate if I paid lower taxes. So I think these are pluses for us. There's a small group that's in about the 160 to about 210 or so that's actually going to pay a little higher tax. But everybody else benefits. And it would be really interesting to find out why they carved out that little group. And I don't know. I have some ideas, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's not because Congress's wages fall in that group. But, so if you make, say, under $35,000, your wages were taxed at, well, under 10 you don't pay any tax. 10 to 35, you were taxed at 15, now you'll be taxed at 12. So your tax rate came down by 3%. Okay, there's those that argue, well, why does the upper tier may get a savings of 4%, and we only get a savings of 3%. Well, if you look at 3% as a percentage of 15%, you're saving 20%. Whereas if you're saving 4% and you were paying 20, you're 14%. So it all depends on how you word it. And so you'll hear these arguments throughout, especially in the media. And they're really, anyways, it's fun to hear them talk. Okay, let me see what else I have. I think more on the expenses. Another one of the ones that we defeated, and it was the Senate had introduced it as part of their bill, was that they were going to withhold 5% on independent contractors, which of course we fought at the state level for years, and we did not want the camel's nose under the tent. So it's good that we stopped that at the beginning. Now, I've yet to meet the person that fully understands this, but that is kind of the tax bill through the eyes of NAR. I want to go over some other things. Are there any questions on the tax bill? Caesar.
I just wanted, I don't know if you forgot to mention it, but there is a benefit of commercial in all real estate. The depreciation used to be 33.5 years and it went to 25 years. And they did that with residential and commercial.
That's right. And they're also, they I think it's called line 79 expenses, which would include like air conditioners and things like that. It sounds like they're going to be much more liberal on expensing those as opposed to depreciating them. So that, you're right, that would be a benefit. Yes?
About state income tax and mortgage interest?
Okay, so you will only be able to deduct your state and local income, property tax up to $10,000.
Total combined?
Total combined. So that's going to affect California, and that really in a nutshell is why California didn't take drop their opposition to it. But the flip side is it's a federal bill, and the feds lowered federal taxes, so it's really not their position to address the state taxes. How it all plays out, it's definitely going to affect, the markets like New Jersey, New York, California, Hawaii, those the high wage earners and the high tax states. So that's pretty much it. I know that's kind of a brief capsule of the tax, but I wanted to cover a couple of other things because it's 2018. We've got an election coming up in November, and I know a lot of people say, well, didn't we just have an election? And well, this year we're going to vote on the governor. And of course, well, is Jerry Brown going to run? Well, Jerry Brown's not going to run. So who is going to run? It's going to be probably Gavin Newsom and Villaraigosa, the two mayors. The former mayor of San Francisco and the former mayor of Los Angeles look to be the front runners. There's a couple of other people that have thrown their name in. There's two Republicans, Cox and one from Huntington Beach. Probably don't have a very good chance of getting in. So it looks like it'll be one of those two. It's interesting to see where the battle lines. John Tran, thank you. John Tran has a chance. John Chen, our current controller, has a chance. He has an outside chance, but he's probably number 3. And what's going to be interesting is from the positions that he's taken so far, he's probably the most pro real estate. So that's good for us. So it'll be really interesting to see where the support lines up, who CAR decides to back. But thank you for bringing that John Tran's name up. So there's 3 three really hot topics that affect us, and one is rent control. And rent control, it's evolved out of the cost of housing and rents going up. And we all know it, we all feel it, and we all see it. And if you're in your home and you own your own home and you've owned it for a long time, you don't feel it the same way. But if you're a first-time buyer, or if you're moving, or if you're a millennial that's now looking for a place to live and you're moving out on your own, all those people are greatly affected by this. And what we found is that there will be some landlords that just kind of keep chipping away $25 and $50 increases and maybe $100 a year, and those have not been the problem. The problem is when a building turns, and there was one in Santa Monica, and they came in and it wasn't Studio City, pardon me, because Santa Monica has rent control, but it was Studio City, and they just jacked the rents way up, and they like doubled all the rents, and it really gave them a story to tell. So they went out and talked to the media ate it up, and so now we're getting a lot of bad publicity. Pasadena is going to be fighting rent control this year. Long Beach is going to be fighting rent control. The LA County is going to be fighting rent control. So we're going to be fighting this on many fronts. We are part of a group. It's called the LA Coalition for Responsible Housing Solutions. So I know these names are kind of tricky, and when you hear them, you don't really know what they mean. But LA Coalition for Responsible Housing Solutions, just when you hear that, remember that's the good guys. That's the one that we're part of, and that's the one that's trying to fight rent control at the county level. So you can't come in and just say, no, we don't want rent control, without coming to the table and saying, well, here's some things that might help our problem, and what if we tried this? So that's the approach that we're taking, but it's a coalition of BOMA, Greater the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, numerous associations, of which we're one of them, Pasadena, Foothill, Glendale, on the other side of town as well. So that coalition is going to be trying to fight it at the county level. The locals will all be fighting it in their Long Beach and Pasadena levels. The next thing that we're going to see, and they're going to put it on the ballot, is if they can get the signatures, and it's a split roll. And let me, a lot of you know what a split roll is. Okay, it goes back to Prop 13. So Prop 13, a little primer on Prop 13. 1978, Howard Jarvis fought the property taxes were skyrocketing because property values were skyrocketing. The taxes were ad valorem, so they went with the value of the property. A lot of states still do this. Texas, Washington, Florida still do this. We saw that it was making the housing unaffordable. So seniors who were on a fixed income, maybe they bought their house for $25,000, but now their house was worth $250,000. Their property taxes had gone up 10 times. They could no longer stay in their home because their property taxes had gone up so much. So the solution was to make it so it goes up 2% a year and cap that. Well, what's happened is our property values have gone up much faster than 2% a year, and so it's affected the income for the counties. The counties now are fighting it. Of course, they have a budget crisis. It affects our health care and our education, which are two big budget items for the county. So the proponents of this new split roll are saying, well, that's great. It was intended to help the seniors stay in their house, but what about, a company that's bought their property why should they benefit from this? So this was designed to help people stay in their house. Why do all the companies and corporations and commercial properties get this? And that's what they're going after. Then on top of that, you have some companies that have incorporated their properties, and then they sell the corporation. So the property doesn't change ownership, but the ownership changes hands, and they've been able to get around the tax increase that way. So there are some issues, some gray areas where they have a legitimate point. Problem is, again, do we want them messing with Prop 13? The answer is no. So we want to preserve Prop 13. It could affect second houses, it could affect vacation rentals, it could affect investment properties, things like that. So that looks like it's going to be a big battle, and we should see that on the ballot. The third one is really new construction, because the problem that we're having is a supply problem. If we had more housing, it would be cheaper to find a place to live. But there's groups out there that oppose every building project, especially at the local level. They're opposed. So they've stopped building. We all know that in 2007, the market turned down. When it got low enough, it was cheaper to buy than to build, so there was no incentive to build. Developers stopped building completely. People kept moving into California. If you've ever seen Joel Singer's presentation, he talks about how many homes we've built versus how many we need. And last year was the first year in 10. I mean, it was the highest number of homes that we had built. It still didn't meet 2017's new demand, let alone make up for the demand that was built up going back to 2007. So they're trying to address this in a number of ways. They're trying to change the CEQA law so that there are fewer CEQA lawsuits filed that are stopping the programs. They're trying to make it easier to build, make it so that if you meet certain requirements, a city can't say no. And then another one that you're probably all familiar with is the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units. So accessory dwelling units would allow you to put a unit on your property. They're fairly liberal because they're intended to really increase the housing supply quickly. I pulled this article off. It says San Francisco landlords are turning crappy old storage rooms into apartments, and it's good news for the city. So you could debate whether or not it's good news for the city and what it does for property values and everything else, but the fact is that that was the state's way of mandating that cities allow you to do garage conversions, pool house conversions, build another unit. So basically everything that was R1 is now in effect R2. That doesn't mean you could just throw somebody in that garage. You still need to pull permits. You still need to comply with the codes. You don't want a fire out there and a loss of life. So they're going to strictly enforce those, but they will allow you to do those things. This is kind of again in the vein of the housing shortage. This is a group. It's the Apartment Association Greater Los Angeles, but they're pushing Live Los Angeles, and this is modeled after Live Denver, Colorado. But what it's going to do is create a voucher program. So one of the issues that organized real estate has with rent control is, okay, let's say you have a family that can't afford food. They don't go to the market and the market just subsidizes their food. They get vouchers and society subsidizes their food. but the market doesn't take that hit. What they're asking us to do in housing is they're asking the landlord to take that hit. So this would be a voucher system where the landlord still gets market rent, but the tenant gets a subsidy. It's a little bit different, I mean, it's a little similar to, we'll say Section 8, where they're getting subsidized housing, but the landlord's still getting a tenant. The difference being, it's got different qualifications for the, it's a volunteer participation on both the tenant and the landlord's side, and then it'll create partnerships. They're looking for employers that will partner with these as well. So that will be interesting to see if that gets any traction. There's a whole bunch of other things that are going to be interesting to watch on the political front, everything from criminal justice to the pension reform and education, healthcare. So it promises to be an exciting year politically. Of course, we have our own excitement, and that is that Susie Dunkel Soto, our immediate past president, is going to be running for city council in Alhambra. So we will be asking for support from each of you there, and we'll be asking each of you that live in Alhambra to really take an active role in it. And I think it's going to be a fun thing. I don't think we've ever done anything like it before. If we have, it's been some time, and it should be fun. So that's what I have prepared. I've got the report from the county supervisors on what their rent stabilization looks like. It's 28 pages. Each of the county supervisors was able to appoint 2 people to the committee, and they're going to have a committee that reviews it. Most of us in this area have Catherine Barger as our representative. She's our best ally on it, and ironically it affects her the most. She has by far the most county area in her district, because she has from here on out to Palmdale and Lancaster. And if you look at the map, most of that area is county. And then of course the person who has the least amount of county area in their district is the one that's pushing this the most. So, but I'm sure it's because they are looking for a platform to run on at the next level. And that would be Sheila Kuehl. Let's see. That's about it.
I know we got a lot of calls to action over the course of the run up until the tax bill. How much of a difference do you feel those made, and should we be responding to those? I'm obviously fishing for a particular answer there.
Yeah. So in California, there was 44,000 responses to those calls for action. So not everybody responded to one. Some people responded more than once. But there were, I think, 3 calls to action. They really think that helped give us the leverage for the concessions in the tax bill that we got. So thank you, Nick. Yes, we should respond to those. It's super easy. You click on it. Sometimes they ask you for your zip code, but that's about it. So thank you. Yes?
Any comment or any information concerning A and B and B?
Airbnb.
Yeah. Any information with your own comment?
Yeah, well, you know, it's yeah, short-term rental. It's pretty much a local issue. There's nothing that I know of at the state level that's affected short-term rentals or addressing them. We might hear about it when we go up in May, but I don't think there's any legislation either at the state or federal level. You know, I like the ability to rent things out. You know, as a property owner, I want to have those rights to do that. It helps our property values. I think CAR in general is supportive of it. I think NAR is as well.
My personal feeling is negative for the community. I live in a neighborhood very stabilized. Never spend 400,000 to build up. It's so good for you. And right now they are very active on the B&B. And they invite whatever the group of tour from overseas, from local.
Yeah.
And every day we see it shrinking. Everybody's equal and fair in the society, but the activity, it looks like the daily commotion. They bother to remember because of we are feeling that, who are they? The stranger, you know?
Sure, they're strangers.
We don't complain to the city. We are worried that in case of we doing the future development, we have some retaliation from that kind of owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the state will look, city have to develop something, the regulation to limit what is the sense of the hotel and the B&B, because the definition is not clear enough.
Yeah. So hotels can't stand them. They really hate them. Because the hotels have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops, including ADA and everything else, right? American Disabilities Act, they have to put ramps up, and somebody renting out their back house, they can have wobbly old crickety steps, or they can do whatever they want, basically. And it affects their business. It's competition for the hotels, so they don't like it. It's you know, it's classic, not in my backyard. You know, do you like it? Well, I like it, but I don't like it in my backyard. I don't want my neighbor to do it. So it's just where do you draw the line between the landlord's rights and the neighborhood's rights? You know, so
It may be a regulation on the city level to control that kind of activity. You have to define what is the limit of the fee. 1 day, 2 days, 1 week.
yeah.
Or 1 month, you know, they cannot just daily in and out. And right now we are living in the terrorist.
What city is it?
I hope. Yeah, it's right. Yeah.
So anyways, it is a local issue at this point.
Freedom, let them live.
Is that it? Oh, Tony?
Mortgage interest, okay, is there any cap on the loan amount?
$750. Yes. So that was a compromise that they reached. And
This is
then
only on personal.
on your own personal property.
Rental is no cap.
We fought to keep that in, so that's still in place. Yeah. All right, thank you very much.